Where to begin?
Well, what was your takeaway from? I mean, this book,
the Woodward book.
I've got to say, even though we knew about it pretty up close for a long time,
Yeah.
And other people have been concerned about it, and I think most of the Republicans on the Hill who have ever dealt with him know all of this stuff. That said, Woodward writing a book about it certainly makes everybody pay closer attention to it and pay more attention to it than say they would with the Fire and Fury book. So,
right.
So
no.
What's your biggest
all the
takeaway?
Anecdotes certainly ring true to the man we know and the man who never evolved or stepped up when he won the presidency. So they're not surprising, but it certainly gives some flavor to it all. I think the book also reveals there are some patriots who are hanging in there, trying very hard to keep this thing together. And I guess we owe them a debt of gratitude. You know, I don't know what. Sometimes you really can't imagine what you would do if you're in that position, in the position of Secretary Mattis or in the position of Gary Cohn, taking papers away to try and prevent something from happening. Yeah. They're basically trying to handle someone who is unhinged and not well and not thinking in the best interest of our country.
Now, Willie, what was there a part for you that stuck out?
Well, I think for me it was Secretary Mattis saying we're dealing with somebody with the intelligence of a fifth or a sixth grader, talking about the president, his understanding of the world. But just to echo what Mika said, I don't think this is terribly surprising to a lot of us who talk to a lot of these people.
Definitely not.
It's what we hear in private now splashed into the pages of a book, that there are people inside the White House, in fact, the people who were closest with President Trump, who believe he is not capable of handling this job, and that they are just guardrails around the presidency of the United States. Of course, the White House has come out and vehemently denied every word of this.
What else
Bob
can
Woodward
they do?
has talked to almost everyone who works inside the White House.
Yeah, and you know, also along that line, this has been going on for a long time. Meek and I went to visit him in Trump Tower back in 2015, I think it was. And everybody was shocked and offended that I had given him campaign advice. And you know what my campaign advice was for him? Read.
Yeah.
I was like, do you?
That was very awkward,
I said,
but you
do
did say
you?
that.
And this was in, what, maybe October of 2015. It was a little awkward. But I go, do
Really
you read?
awkward.
Do you ever read? Can you read? And I wasn't being sarcastic. And he just had people around him who also said, during the middle of that campaign, that he had, and I'm sorry, we've got to just keep saying it, that he had early stages of dementia, that they had to treat him a certain way.
Well, that would be kind.
That they had to act a certain way around him. And it's not me saying he has early stages of dementia. This is what they were saying during the campaign and talking about how they had to work around all of his limitations.
Well, it may not be new or surprising what we hear in this book, but it's no less disconcerting to hear these things said about the President of the United States by people who are his allies, people who are working alongside him.
So we're just starting to dig through.
Could I ask John really quickly a question?
Do you want to hear what you're asking him about, or do you want to ask him and then back into it?
John, I've read a couple of
I think
news.
he's going to take the latter.
Yeah, you know the answer to that. I'm going to start talking about baseball now.
Oh, no.
I don't take leading questions. Well, of course, I am in part from Alabama, and Donald Trump believes that everybody from Alabama is stupid. He believes everybody from Alabama talks with marbles in their mouth. He believes everybody that went to the University of Alabama is dumb and incapable of holding down a government job. The insults on Alabama from Donald Trump, it's been nonstop for a week. Insults attacking the great state of Alabama. He did it in a Politico article. He's doing it with Bob Woodward now. He may hate Alabama, but in the words of Skinner, a Southern man don't need him around anyhow. Yeah, now that I've gotten through that, because Mika thinks I'm incapable of asking you a question because I went to the greatest university
It's up there
on the planet.
Right there. This guy is, I believe the phrase that he uses is mentally retarded.
That's horrible.
He's this dumb Southerner. He couldn't even be a one-person country lawyer down in Alabama. That doesn't sound like.
No, he has.
Doesn't sound very flattering.
He has hatred and contempt for my people. Yeah. And yes, my people, places that I grew up in and was raised and went to school in. And one of the great state schools in America, Alabama. Now, let me get to the question. What was your big takeaway from the book? Was there a certain story a certain element that struck you?
I'd say one, after a series of books, the president, when he talks to, when he's on tape with Woodward, he says, oh, it's going to be another one of these bad books. He's had a bunch of bad books, right? Fire and Fury, obviously the biggest selling so far. Now Woodward may exceed that, who knows? But they all paint a consistent picture. That's the one thing. You draw a through line from Fire and Fury. Most people do not think Michael Wolff has the kind of credibility Bob Woodward has in reporting inside White House accounts. But the pictures in the two books are strikingly consistent, as are books like the book by Omarosa. All these books paint a consistent picture. That's the first thing. The second thing is, they knew this book was coming out. It had a publication date of next Tuesday. If you had read anything about how Bob Woodward books work, it's that the Washington Post somehow gets a copy of the book the previous week. And yet yesterday they were caught totally flat-footed and flabbergasted for hours before they mounted any kind of a critical response. To your point, about the Southern thing, it's interesting that it was one of the few things he picked up on yesterday and directly tweeted about, was trying to refute the notion that he would ever criticize Southerners, because he recognizes his political vulnerability there. There's other things to say about the hedged nature of some of these denials that he's citing, the way Mattis phrased his denial, the way Kelly phrased his denial. We can go into that in more detail, but the last thing that I'll say is it just is a stunningly devastating picture, not just of the president, but of all the people around him. And all these people who went to Woodward, many of whom have now left the administration. There are clear breadcrumbs that lead to people like Gary Cohn and Rex Tillerson and other people in this book. All of these people, though, come off as badly as the presidents do in the way in which they enabled him. Some of them acting, as Mika said, like guardrails of democracy, trying to save the world. Maybe Jim Mattis falls into that category. But a bunch of these other guys really look like they were in a culture of enabling the president's worst instincts rather than pushing back against him. It is a very unflattering picture of everyone in that White House for the first 18 months.
Absolutely not how a presidency should function, for sure. And Carol Lee, you see consistencies with other books and other reporting, but also with your investigative reporting on this president, his behavior, his ability to contain himself and his temper. You've seen it.
Yeah, and the big takeaway for me was looking at this. It's just hard to fathom a president of the United States, the commander-in-chief, giving orders, saying that he wanted certain policies to be adopted, and the people around him essentially thinking that they know better and running a sort of tag team operation where one of them would warn another one about the president's moving in a certain direction, and they would all kind of mobilize to keep the president from doing what he wanted to do. And our reporting showed that, we focused largely on the president and his national security team, and starting from last summer, there was just this deterioration of that relationship and a constant battle between his national security advisors, who wanted him to take measures that they thought were far better than the ones the president was proposing, and a president who they felt needed to be contained on everything from Afghanistan to the Korean Peninsula.
Well, looking through our own copy of the book, there's so much to work with. Here's how NBC's Kristen Welker reported on it yesterday.
In his explosive new book, Bob Woodward describes the Trump presidency in the midst of a nervous breakdown. Excerpts first obtained by the Washington Post quote aides calling it crazy town, at times paralyzed by the Russia investigation, and that possible interview with Robert Mueller.
I've always wanted to do an interview.
Woodward describing the president's one-time lead attorney, John Dowd, so convinced the president would commit perjury, he staged a practice interview last January. That session so rocky, Woodward reports Mr. Dowd later told Mr. Trump, don't testify. It's either that or an orange jumpsuit. The book also a remarkable portrait of aides taking extreme measures to block their boss. Former economic advisor Gary Cohn reportedly preventing the president from withdrawing from a trade agreement with South Korea by swiping a letter off his desk. And after the president told Defense Secretary James Mattis he wanted to assassinate Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad for a chemical attack on civilians, Mattis reportedly told the president on the phone he would do it, but then telling a senior aide, quote, we're not going to do any of that. And the book describing extraordinary insults from the president's staff. Woodward writing Mattis has described Mr. Trump as having the understanding of a 5th or 6th grader, and Chief of Staff John Kelly has called the president an idiot, an account first reported by NBC News. Kelly calling that accusation BS and another pathetic attempt to smear people close to President Trump and distract from the administration's many successes. Mattis calling the accusations the product of someone's rich imagination. Woodward also describing a president lobbing his own insults, calling Attorney General Jeff Sessions a traitor, mentally retarded, and a dumb Southerner. Woodward didn't talk to President Trump for the book, saying his requests went unanswered, publishing this phone call with the president from last month.
Who did you ask about speaking to me?
Well, about 6 people.
Well, they don't tell me.
The president responding in an interview with the Daily Caller, saying it's just another bad book. And Woodward had a lot of credibility problems.
Wow. As you heard in Kristen's piece, Woodward's book alleges that in the White House residence on January 27th, the president's then personal attorney, John Dowd, peppered Trump with questions about the Russia investigation, provoking stumbles, contradictions, and lies until the president eventually lost his cool. Dowd said that, "Don't testify. It's either that or an orange jumpsuit. If it's decision time, you're going to go forward. I can't be with you." I think the president of the United States cannot be seen taking the fifth, Trump said. No, I'm a good witness. I'll be a real good witness. Dowd knew this was self-delusion. You are not a good witness, Dowd said again. Trump had one overriding problem that Dowd knew but could not bring himself to say to the president: "You're an expletive liar." The book describes that on March 5th, Dowd and Trump attorney Jay Sekulow met in Mueller's office with the special counsel and his deputy, where Dowd and Sekulow reenacted Trump's January practice session.
And this is the incredible part, I think, Willie, that Dowd, who we've always seen as being, an opponent of Robert Mueller, they sit down and they both talk about the same problem they have as Americans.
Yeah.
And Dowd said to Mueller, "I'm not going to sit there and let him look like an idiot," Dowd said. "The guys overseas are going to say, I told you he was an idiot. I told you he was a damn dumbbell. What are you dealing with this idiot for?"
Wow.
And then Mueller says, "John, I understand." So there you have it. It's extraordinary. This is, I think, one of the most extraordinary parts of the book, where Robert Mueller, American, is talking to Donald Trump's attorney, also as an American. And both of these two, who are supposed to be on opposite sides, are both saying, we can't embarrass the President of the United States in the face of the world this way, because he will look too stupid and it will actually hurt American interests abroad.
It's extraordinary on so many levels. First of all, we're hearing Bob Mueller's voice through Bob Woodward's book. We don't hear Bob Mueller's voice very often. And that you have the president's own attorney not just protecting the President of the United States, this president, President Trump in this case, but protecting effectively the presidency and protecting effectively the country from embarrassment by having the president testify in this way. And remember, Dowd did quit shortly thereafter. So clearly he didn't think that Donald Trump was going to listen to him in the end. And he wasn't the advocate, perhaps, Donald Trump, that he thinks he can be. Remember, he thinks, if I sit across from somebody, I'm going to be able to make my case. I'm going to convince them. I'm a salesman. I can make this happen. And Dowd is telling him in no uncertain terms, no, sir, you are not.
Lawyers have an ethical obligation that if they know that their client is committing perjury or is going to commit perjury, they have to report that to the court. This is, Mika, obviously something that John Dowd knew that he was going to have to do if Donald Trump testified.
In an email to the Washington Examiner, Dowd wrote, there was no so-called practice session or reenactment of a mock interview at the special counsel's office.
John,
But let's just be clear about one thing. Let's just be clear about one thing. Mueller there, though, is not at all ceding the notion that he doesn't want Trump to come and testify. Mueller is simply saying, and it actually rings true to how Mueller would handle such a thing, which is say, I understand. Meaning, I understand the nature of your problem. I understand why you don't want to let the president testify. I get it.
Right.
Doesn't mean I'm trying to protect the president or Donald Trump's presidency, but I understand the nature of your problem as a lawyer that you have here, Mr. Dowd. Nonetheless, I still want the president to come and testify because I want him to.
What also rings true here, and I've been saying it for some time, that it's been very clear And here Bob Woodward confirms it 1,000 times over, that the president is surrounded by lawyers and always has been surrounded by lawyers who think he's too stupid to sit down man to man across the table and talk to Robert Mueller. And you read what Dowd has said, you read what Sekulow is saying, they all say one thing to his face. Rudy Giuliani, you know, Rudy Giuliani will huff and puff, but the bottom line is Giuliani believes, like everybody else, that Donald Trump is too stupid or too mentally scattered or maybe just unable to keep up with Robert Mueller, and he'll commit perjury.
Well, I think there's certainly stupid is one possibility. Another, obviously, is.
I'm saying what the lawyers.
Yes. No, I understand.
Not what I'm thinking.
No, I understand.
And as I've said, I would always be insulted that they're thinking that just because he went to St. Paul's.
Oh, here we go.
Which is a fine school, by the way.
Yeah.
St.
So
Paul's.
I've heard. Not like some of the better public schools in Alabama, but still a decent school.
Or Andover.
Yeah.
But but St. Paul's is still a really good school.
Yeah.
And then you got your Princeton. He went to Princeton.
Yeah.
And
good school.
It's almost like they're thinking, his lawyers are thinking that a guy from Queens can't keep up with Robert Mueller, who then went to, you said UVA Law School?
They know.
No, they know. And so they don't, just like everybody else around him, they all think he's dumb. They all think he's stupid. They all say he's an idiot. They all think he's... And I'd be really insulted if I were the president. People thought that about me.
I know you would, and God knows no one would ever think that you were too dumb to go up against some Andover Princeton grad, but because you were educated at some of the best schools. But the other thing they could think is that in addition to or separate from, that he's a pathological liar and that he will lie. Regardless of what his mental state is, regardless of what his intellectual capacity is, that the president will commit perjury because either the facts, the truth are bad, so he will lie to avoid telling the truth, or he doesn't even know what the truth is because, as you suggested a second ago, not so much that he is dumb, again, just putting myself in the minds of his lawyers,
that's what
but
his lawyers think.
That he's lost track of reality one way or the other.
Yeah,
some of those things, some combination of those things are clearly what his lawyers think. All of his lawyers think it would be a mistake for him to sit in front of Bob Mueller and his team.
I think we have to be clear here that it's all the people around him that are calling him dumb and saying he's like a fifth or sixth grader in his intelligence. That's an insult to a lot of fifth and sixth graders. But there's no doubt that they think this guy is not man enough to sit across the table from Robert Mueller. And he doesn't have the capabilities, the mental capabilities to do it. And can you imagine being president of the United States? He got elected president of the United States.
Ridiculous.
No, what?
You can't even imagine being the host of this show and having people think that about you, right?
Well, they think that about me, but that's different.
Right?
Okay.
I can live with it.
But
Okay,
not only did they believe that, but Dowd held a session to convince the president of that. He said, here's what it'll look like. Pretend I'm Bob Mueller, and we'll have this back and forth, and let's see how this goes.
Right.
And after 30 minutes, according to Woodward's book, Donald Trump himself conceded, okay, I don't want to do
right,
that.
I think the president is right here.
Okay.
I think he should
First of all, I
talk
think
to
saying
Mueller.
he's ignorant is kindness at this point. Carol Lee.
No, I think he's a president. You're not the president. Dowd's not the president. He has to be smart. He should testify with Mueller. I'd just be insulted.
We'd like to see that. Carol Lee, let's talk about John Kelly, who calls it crazy town, and certainly in Bob Woodward's descriptions has his own opinions about the president that came out. And his denials, because everyone's denying it this morning inside the White House, sound a lot like the denials he gave you back when you had similar reporting.
Yeah, it's almost identical, Mika. He said that, when we reported a couple months ago that John Kelly had referred multiple times to the president as an idiot behind his back, essentially thought that he knew better than the president and was acting as if he had gotten elected. John Kelly issued a statement and called our story BS and said that he and the president have a very candid relationship, but he's never called him an idiot. And we saw yesterday he issued almost an identical statement saying the same thing. We've also reported on Secretary Mattis and his relationship with the president, and he's, how they've had sort of a falling out, and that the president believes that Mattis looks down on him and doesn't and slow walks a lot of his policies, which he does. And I think that the question now is, the president was not blind to all of this. Our reporting shows that he was aware that what the people around him thought about him, going back to when Rex Tillerson called him a moron. But that was when it was private, and now it's all out there in public. And so how the president responds to that, what moves he makes, whether he fires anybody, whether he moves to further isolate some of the people that still are around him, who he now knows and the world knows feel this way about him, is something that I think is going to be really interesting to watch, because clearly, a number of, and the national security team in particular, of those folks have been blocking him from making what most foreign policy experts would tell you would be really disastrous policy positions.
Sounds like they're doing the 25th Amendment without actually doing the 25th Amendment.
I'd fire
That's
the
what it looks like to
attorneys.
me.
I'd fire all the attorneys.
All right, still ahead on Morning Joe.
Get some that respect you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your president and your attorney still think you're too stupid to talk to Robert Mueller and not man enough to?
He calls it an
I think he hears you.
Woodward calls it an administrative coup d'etat in the book.
Okay.
An administrative coup d'etat.
We're going to bring in New York Times reporter Michael
I think that's
Schmidt,
how you pronounce that.
who has
Yeah,
brand new
coup d'etat,
reporting on the
coup d'etat.
potential of Bob Mueller and Donald Trump coming face to face. Plus,
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.